What's up, guys? Philip at Trade Genius. All right, it's time for another Bitcoin update. We're going to take a look at the Bitcoin price action and see what we can expect for the upcoming week. So we'll take a look at the weekly chart. It's got a similar velocity to what we saw back in the end of 2017. We'll take a look at our Parabolic chart and see how that's shaping up. And we'll see how we're interacting with our Fib multiplier levels. We'll take a look at the market internals again and see what our funding rates and our long short exposures are telling us. We'll take a quick look also at the crypto fear and greed chart. We'll take a look at the GBTC premium charts. We'll take a look at the dollar yuan and see how the devaluation is leading price. And last but not least, we'll look at the Tether chart. Pretty bullish outlook there. All right, guys, let's dive into this video and check this out.
Trade Genius.
Okay, guys, weekly chart on Bitcoin. This velocity is basically looking like the end of 2017, where we got into the last part of that parabolic moonshot and topped out the market. Would not be surprised to see a similar move to end this current uptrend. And then I think going forward, the surprise would be the lack of a 40% type pullback as we consolidate in a range that's a lot higher than anyone was expecting. I think that's the surprise in this round. And why? Because unlike previous cycles, we now have serious institutional size inflows. Previous cycles were largely retail. When you have retail going in, you're going to see those dramatic pops and drops. Now, we have had a 30% high to low, and I think, again, we were looking at ranges of 20 to 30% versus the 30 to 40% ranges that we've seen historically in the past. So that's taken care of. Now we're moving higher. Weekly chart wise, this candle, this is more like a gravestone doji, which is generally bearish. So what we want to see is a close above this high, which is 13,868. Okay, that's the high on Coinbase. Close or above that would negate that doji. Now, we've already made some progress in the last week. We came back with a green candle, which is good. If this was red, then we probably would be looking at some of these lower moving averages on the weekly, which we'll talk about here in a second. Currently, in this weekly candle, we are making some progress. And what we're basically doing here is we're trying to retrace against this bearish fib area now, because that's from this high to this low. So once we get a close above the 12,624, for me, I get rid of this bearish fib zone, and that negates this downside target of that bearish fib zone, which is around 8,600, which interestingly coincides with our faster moving average on the weekly. So now on these faster moving averages on the weekly, when Bitcoin gets into this type of velocity, we can go several weeks without getting a test of that weekly average. We should see a test of this weekly average at the end of this move. When it tops out, you're going to see a decent pullback. This should get tested. This WMA20 is going to accelerate in its rise. So the previous week had an average of approximately just north of 8,000. Now we're currently at 8,500. And as we keep going like this on the weekly, those weekly values are going to jump up. And this will be in the 9 to 10,000s in the next coming weeks if this structure remains in the current state. So the weekly structure, basically what we have is in a long fib move, and we're retracing against this current short fib. And then ultimately we have this larger fib that we're eating into, and that's from our all-time highs to our most recent bear market lows. So tremendous progress for the bulls. I think this next cyclical bull market well underway. All right, now flipping to a daily chart. Again, what we're going to be looking for, just real quickly, daily levels are going to be a close above these highs. So the high we're looking for a close above is $12,064. Okay, so looking for a daily close above that if you're bullish. If you're shorting this market, you really don't want to see that happen. And then, of course, for this to play out, you'd be looking for a downside target of 86.55. However, as you're going to see in later parts of this video, I'm going to show you that I think the odds are this is breaking higher, and we're in a larger consolidation area here before the next thrust up. All right, so let's take a look at our parabolic chart. All right, guys, so basically what I've done here is I've kind of shown, roughly these are the areas of consolidation, and you'll notice that basically after we get our move up into that area of consolidation, you can kind of measure where we are range bound for a bit. So this one was 39 bars, this base 2 was 34 bars, base 3 was 31 bars, and that is what you would typically see is a shrinking time base of consolidation. So now base 4, it will remain to be seen how long this consolidation is. I will say this, in this consolidation pattern, we could even approach the 14,000, spike up into it, but still pull back, and this still could be within this area of consolidation. So just keep in mind that of these areas of consolidation that we've been basing off of since the beginning of this move way back in the beginning of the year, the areas of consolidation have been taking a month or more. Now that should continue to shrink, so we should start seeing an up move out of this consolidation within this month. Also keep in mind, some of your better Litecoin moves have come out of these areas of consolidation. So for Litecoin investors, you actually want to see this. And again, if this moves up here, and I think it does pull back one more time, we're not breaking right out of this consolidation at this point. So all of this price action is falling in line with this parabolic structure, which is very, very bullish. And I think that the key here will be, I think, one more move up, pull back, and then at that point get ready to swing long, because that next move could be potentially extremely explosive given the lack of volume that we've historically seen up at these levels. All right, real quick, let's take a look at the Fib Multiplier Chart. Again, most of our cyclical tops have been at this Fib 2 level, which is currently at 11,620. Now, typically, whenever you breach these Fib levels, what'll happen is it opens up the gateway to the next Fib level. So I think reclaiming, again, on the daily, reclaiming the high of 12,054 is going to solidify this base 4 of consolidation. And I think ultimately, all of the upside targets for this next move up would likely be targeting this Fib 3 level north of 17K. I know that seems like a lot, and that's a big jump in market cap, but again, this is just the way that Bitcoin moves historically, so you just have to keep this mindset that this move is probable given the current parabolic structure of Bitcoin. All right, let's look at some market internals. Okay, so we've talked about this chart before. Basically, what we have here are the Bitfinex long exposure and Bitfinex short exposure. And then this is our funding rate on BitMEX. When these bars are elevated like this, that means that the long side of the trade is crowded and you could potentially see it move down. So similar to what we saw back here, and then you have a move down. So that is something that I'm keeping an eye on. Obviously at this point, this 11,555 level, give or take, to 11,600, that's going to be an area of support if we do get a dip back. But the problem or the difference with this, and we'll get into this in the Tether chart, is that Tether's rising right now, and that wasn't necessarily the case here. We actually had a pullback in Tether. And so anyway, we'll take a look at that in a little bit. But first though, let's take a look at the crypto fear and greed. So we have a 74, and that's moving back up a little bit. Now, historically in the bear market, this would be your raging area to short, but we're not in the bear market anymore. And here's where your key level reading is, this 95, and then we topped out there for a bit. So that's key. Okay, I think that's the real barometer now of what is overbought and toppy. So the next move up into the 90s, that's where we're going to be getting careful with our stops if you're swing trading, and just know that you're getting the risk to the downside is getting pretty high, and start looking for a shortable move. While we're looking at these types of charts, let's look at the GBTC premium. So again, when you start getting north of 40, that's really also a key indication that things are getting toppy. So this is the premium on GBTC, which is your over-the-counter stock, basically, which is a fund backed by actual Bitcoin by Grayscale Investments. And what this means is that when there's a lot of buy-in on that security, GBTC, you can look that up in any stock program. Basically, that means that there's a lot of FOMOing in, and the premium goes up. So they're actually paying for a premium of 45% over actual spot price per share. So, when we get these types of readings, that's usually a local top in the price action as well. If we look at the current premium, we're at 32%. So not extreme yet, considering how the readings have relatively been. So, but once we start getting above north of 40, that's when we start looking again at shortable price action. Real quick, Bitcoin futures gap chart. The bears, they'd be eyeballing this gap at 8,500. Gaps don't have to close. Yes, you can have abandoned gaps. And what's interesting is that gaps are more powerful if they're visible on higher time frames. If you go to like a 2-day chart, there's no gap, and that's something to note. Some of these other gaps that have closed that are visible on a 2-day and higher chart, obviously gets closed. So, that's something to keep in mind too. Again, 2-day chart gap, there is no gap there. So if you're a bull, that's your bullish case. But if you're a bear, that's probably your downside target if this breaks down. But for this to break down, we got to see some things changing fundamentally. So that takes us to our next chart, which is Tether cap. So Tether cap, just moving up. There's just more Tether being minted. And again, this is a delayed fuel for Bitcoin moving up. So again, here's our last area of consolidation, and we just saw Tether's rising, and we're in the exact same scenario. So we could see more basing in this area, and then, but ultimately, if this Tether cap does not substantially decrease and is continuing this structure higher, you really would be foolish to ignore that and not expect to see a large move up. So everything is still in play as far as how the parabolic model is playing out, that we are going to ultimately see a larger move higher. Tether is just not stopping. So we've talked about China playing into that. So let's take a look lastly at the Yuan devaluation, how that's looking. All right, guys, so orange is the Yuan. Ignore the shaded areas. That's just our Fib zones. So the Yuan devaluation of the Yuan means this line goes up because this is USD CNH. It's a Forex pair. So as you notice, this started to rise before this move down was done, and then we had a U-turn in the price action and moving up, and the Yuan devaluation seems to be back on track from this corrective stage here where we basically had this consolidation range. So that was the last base number 3. That's where the Yuan was consolidating. The Yuan started to strengthen a bit, and that's where Bitcoin caught down to it somewhat, and now we're seeing that rising again. So that's also a bullish sign. So again, we've talked about this where, the Yuan devaluation would push people to maybe move into Tethers. Tethers is a lot easier to move capital out of the country and store it into Bitcoin and hedge against that inflation as the Yuan devalues, again, tying back to the trade wars. So I think you have a very bullish case for Bitcoin here at this point, folks. I think this week we will see a bias to the upside. I will leave you with a drill down on the hourly chart. So we were in this consolidation, guys, on the hourly. Weekends have been bullish, especially Friday evening. So if you want to see how bullish the weekend is, take a look at what happens on the market close on a Friday. If that's really, really bullish, you can probably expect to see Saturday and Sunday being bullish as well. If that's muted, then it might just be kind of a choppy weekend. Or if it's bearish, then probably see some downside on the weekend. So that's just something to keep in mind. But the hourly chart here, so we last measured move for a Fibonacci move, we had this low to high. We came back, we tested that 0.705 level, 11,073. Again, a lot of traders will eyeball that for an optimal trade entry off of a pullback. That got tagged, and then ultimately we hit the target on that Fib extension at 11,941. Shot past that a little bit, and now we're consolidating, which is a very bullish action. So this Fib range actually goes bye-bye, and this bearish Fib zone from this high to low has been violated, so that goes away. And we've broken out of this consolidation nicely. So the next thing that we'll take a look at is essentially we're going to move this line to this, basically this area here. That's going to be our support and resistance, more or less around 11,500. You also have a little bit of support a little higher. So that's going to be basically our new support and resistance zone. It would not be the end of the world if that pulls back to that and then bounces and advances higher. Otherwise, now what we're looking at is we've gotten this larger pullback into this Fib zone here, which ultimately has a target here of 12,628. And if that target gets hit, I think that's going to green light the next move up again toward that area towards 17,000. So very bullish price action here coming into the start of the week. And I would say that buy the dip mode is on. We are currently long in the room. And if you're interested in joining us in there, head over to tradelikeagenius.com. I've got an interesting week of videos lined up for you guys. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already. Get notified when those come out. And guys, if you're interested in any alts that you want us to cover, list them below and we'll take a look at the most requested ones and cover them. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.
Trade Genius.